Indeed, a very warm welcome to you. This is the Business Hour podcast. My name is Jimmy Mbogo, and this is where all the important conversations about your startup and your business are going to happen. But before we go into the day's discussion, here is your business tip for the day. And it says, achieving the highest possible return on human capital must be every manager's goal, by Brian Tracy. My guest today to be able to give you some of the tips that you need to consider for your startup to grow is none other than Joram Mwinamo, the CEO for WYLDE International. Joram, karibu sana to the program.
Asante sana. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And I'm glad that we get to have this conversation today.
Yes, I'm also happy to be here.
From where you sit, what is your biggest concern about the number of entrepreneurs? Every day we see the number of entrepreneurs coming up, but ideally not everyone can be an entrepreneur.
Yes, I think there are different things that drive people to be entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's economic conditions, and I think across Africa, entrepreneurship is being seen as the solution to youth unemployment because there are not enough jobs being created by the larger companies. And it can be, but as you say, not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Other people become entrepreneurs out of necessity. Others because they stumble upon an idea, they try it out and it works. And then others become accidental entrepreneurs because, say, their parents were running a business, they pass on, and then they are forced to take it over and, run the business as their own. So there are many different reasons why people become entrepreneurs, but I don't think it is something that everyone should necessarily be considering, because as you will learn, entrepreneurship is a very grueling journey, and it's something that you have to, when you jump into it, it's with both feet, and you have to make it happen
and
down the line.
And it's actually also it's very time consuming if
yes.
you look at it from that angle.
Yeah.
And I just want to get your point and your view in terms of what is the status of SMEs in the country right now?
So we've just concluded a report actually looking at what the state of SMEs is, and come across some data, largely discouraging data, because since the COVID situation started, we actually have a majority of SMEs either struggling or facing reduced income during this period. A lot of people have had to let go of their employees. A lot of people are very worried about the future because in many other countries, the COVID situation was seen as a 3-month thing and then things reopen. But here we have already gone past 3 months and we still have no idea whether the economy will reopen fully anytime soon. So this is causing a lot of distress and worry for a lot of people who are SMEs right now.
From where you sit, is there a lot of optimism or pessimism in the SME sector?
It is actually, I think we had 51% of people being quite worried, which is majority of your SMEs, and not being sure of what is happening down the line, not being sure of when the economy is going to reopen. In one of the questions that we asked, which was if government interventions do not work, are you still going to have your business open by the end of the year? Only 45% of people said yes. Okay. So it means majority are actually worried that they might have to close down their businesses by the end of the year if things do not improve.
And I'm sure for those majority that you're talking about, their biggest concern is the issue of capital and just to be able to sustain their businesses.
Yes. Actually, in another question we asked, 80% of people said the most dire thing they need right now is funding to keep their businesses afloat, to keep their businesses moving. We had the government give some guidelines to banks to, in a sense, reschedule loans and postpone loans and those kinds of things. But you find that, most of the people had their income reduced significantly, so they don't even have that money to operate. Some people have taken, the steps to reduce salaries of the people who are working for them or send people on unpaid leave as a way of conserving capital to just stay alive. So I would say there's a lot of very stressful things happening right now. The government lifted, the curfew and inter-county travel recently, which was very welcome for many people. But on the flip side, you have people very concerned about the health and safety of, is it safe to actually reopen our offices and bring, our staff back to interact with customers, yet there is a risk that they can get COVID. So I would find like most people are walking a tightrope, just trying to survive during this period.
All right, now within the same space where we're still talking about capital, there's also the issue of what is the best way to raise capital for your startup? Is it going for a loan? Is it going for that little savings that you've had? And again, for a lot of people, they've been destabilized with this COVID pandemic.
So one of the things you will realize a lot about Kenyan SMEs and startups is that people rely on their savings a lot to keep their businesses going when things are very difficult. But this is either because of lack of awareness or how our financial institutions are structured. So you find that banks could be a source of capital, but have very stringent conditions as to how people can go about borrowing that money. You have to have some kind of collateral to be able to give to the bank for them, or you have to be buying an asset which they can repossess. So outside of that, you find the options are very few to get financing, while in other places, you could get financing just on the basis of your cash flow. And then the other less explored option is usually equity, where you can have investors put money into your business. I think as an ecosystem, we are very young. As a country, we are very young into this space of people accepting external capital, because accepting external capital means you're accepting someone else to have visibility and to hold you accountable and to have a stake in your business. But those are options of capital, and people should definitely consider that. The equity path is a lot cheaper, but it comes with a marriage of a partner who becomes part of your business. Okay, and
actually that's a good point, because do you feel there's an over-reliance in terms of loan for startups?
Yes, and this is interesting because a study I came across recently, sometime in the past, said that in developed countries, banks only finance up to 40% of the working capital needs of businesses. The rest of the 60% is actually funded by venture capitalists, private equity, angel investors, and like state, capital, like de-risked money from governments. So we are actually in a very precarious situation, because in Kenya, most of the capital available just comes from banks. But there's many other sources of capital, like pension funds are sitting on quite a bit of money that they could invest into small and medium-sized enterprises, but they do not, because they do not understand mechanisms. In Kenya, people just still think property is the best investment to go for, yet businesses can generate quite a significant return. So this is a culture that we need to change and educate people within pension funds and investment vehicles that SMEs are a viable place to invest.
However, on the issue of investment, and I feel, and probably this is something that you can tell me as the expert, there's a lot of risk associated with SMEs. And that is why you find a lot of these banks themselves shying away from financing SMEs, because the number of SMEs that are popping up every day is almost equal to the number of SMEs going down.
Shut down, yes. I think it's also largely cultural, because they also say high risk, high return. So, so I think it's just that as a country, we've not spent enough time understanding those risks and what's associated. Like you can de-risk quite a bit by understanding a lot about an SME in terms of how are their books structured, how does this person have other businesses, do they have property, or are they running one business or multiple business, do they have property outside of this? Because you'd find that a lot of SMEs, when they approach banks, they approach them from a very suspicious point of view, where they'll only give them the information that they want to know. But if trust was to be built between the SME and the bank, or the startups and the bank, there could be a realization that there's actually something here, because we've lived for a very long time without banks financing SMEs outside of collateral and asset financing. Yet you have so many other SMEs, technology-based, healthcare-based, agricultural-based, that have gone to grow without bank financing. So is it that somebody did not foresee that this was a viable investment vehicle? Some of them have grown to multi-billion shilling entities that are now being funded from outside of Kenya by venture capitalists. You have, people like this company called Cellulant that was able to raise $45 million. How is it that a foreigner was able to see that this technology company has the capacity to absorb that kind of money, yet the local market was not able to see that they can invest in something like this? So I think it's about changing what our perception is, changing our credit scoring mechanism just outside of collateral, and looking at other things that build value around a business. Because we have thousands of SMEs thriving without bank financing. How much more would they go if they got that capital?
Okay, and I think the one thing that a lot of banks, I'm not an expert in banking, this is just my suspicion, is that a lot of these banks deal with how is the packaging of this SME. Where do you find a lot of SMEs making mistakes in terms of their packaging?
Yes, so I think there's they do not speak the same language. The banks and the SMEs do not speak the same language because they've not taken time to understand each other. Even the SMEs have not taken time to understand what are the things that when I present to the bank will present me as a less risky individual. And that even goes back to how the SME runs itself. What kind of records do I keep? Am I audited? Do I have systems and structures that keep me accountable? Do I have an internal audit or an external audit function? Do I have a strong governance structure? Who sits on my board as an SME? If I had 5, 6 credible individuals sitting on my board, even the bank will look and see, these are individuals who, if anything went wrong, we can count on them to take responsibility. So there are many non-financial things that can be done and non-asset things that can be done to de-risk an SME and make it something that can be invested into.
All right, but you've talked actually about the issue of boards, and even when you look at these private funds that are not listed at the NSE, they have a board. However, the people who are calling the shots are very few, not particularly involving the board.
Yes, so it brings about a question of what are our governance structures like. If you look at the collapse of companies from the retail to banking sector, it all had to do with governance in terms of what checks and balances were there on the board. And to a large extent, it starts with what kind of individuals do you have there? What kind of competencies do you have there? If you're a retail company, do you have retail competencies on your board that can hold the management team accountable to details? If you're in the banking sector, do you have strong banking competencies that are trusted by the market? In fact, in a lot of jurisdictions, you have people investing just by what names are there on that board, and are those people we can trust to hold the management accountable and to put up good systems and processes. So governance is definitely something that we need to look into, because we've had a lot of companies that have collapsed with people's money, and it's something that I think should become a much bigger discussion, even outside of listed companies. It should become a discussion for people to have strong governance systems.
All right, right now we're going through a pandemic, and there's the question of how best can SMEs manage their finances without burning out during this period.
Yes. So one of the big things right now is conservation of capital and being able to go through the period, so that if we are going to have this depressed period for another 3 to 6 months, is your business going to be able to go through that period? Have you reduced your expenses to the level of that you can afford during that time? And we've been telling people to do brave things. Talk to your landlord and tell them, look, things are difficult. Can you reduce rent just for this period so that we can conserve money and get to the other side? Some people have to have conversations with their staff members whether they can reduce salaries for the period, so that once it's over, they can return back to what was there before. Also, one of the other things we're telling people is do not shy away from the market at this time, that even if there is COVID, stay visible. Explore new ways of staying visible by going digital, making sure you're in the face of your customer, whether it's on your social media platforms, or also direct contact. Make sure you're contacting your clients and finding out how are things going. If your business was very dependent on people coming in and accessing it physically, are you able to put in place delivery services so that your product can go out and people can consume it in their places? So there are many things you can innovate and do. If you are a service business and meeting people physically, can you meet them on online on the platforms that have come up like Zoom, and can you do a training or a coaching session, or meet your client and deliberate online. So business should not stop because of COVID. Things should definitely keep moving, because that's what keeps the economy going.
All right, and over the recent past, one of the things that we've actually seen is that the number of unemployment is actually going up. The number of people losing their jobs is actually going up. That means in the near future, what we're looking at is a good number of people trying out their luck in business. What are some of the questions that I need to ask before starting a business?
And definitely we encourage people, like if you've lost your source of income, whether a job or whatever it is, look at opportunities out there that can help you earn an income, because you probably have rent to pay and things to do. The first thing is to look for where is the need. Is there a need that is currently there? This is actually quite interesting, because I have a friend who realized with children at home, they need to be engaged, and parents are wandering around how do they keep them engaged. The online learning is not working very well, and he started to offer tutoring services, especially for those in their final year in high school, to keep them going so that they're not disadvantaged when they go back to school. And parents have been willing to pay for something like that. There's a lot of jobs online in what we are calling the gig economy. There are a lot of platforms that are offering where you can do short-term consultancy jobs, whether it's writing or research or this kind of thing and the other. So the number one thing to ask is there a need that I can fulfill, that I have skills for, that people are looking out? I have somebody who started doing pizzas and delivering from their home, and they are making, I think, up to 40,000 shillings a week or something of a sort. So there's opportunities. So it's just about looking at what can I do. Another friend of mine started a pork joint and was not doing that before. It's taken off. So it's looking at where are the needs, where are the opportunities that can be fulfilled, where people are demanding for stuff, and I know I can do a good job in that particular area. And then start small. You don't need capital. Just start where you are. Offer yourself, put it out on social media that there are certain things you can do, and then wait for the requests to come in and get the journey started.
All right, let's talk about investors for a minute. There's a lot of considerations that investors have to look at, and in your opinion, in your expert opinion, what are some of the key considerations that investors are currently looking at before deciding where to invest their money?
So a big thing is just whether the product or service that you've created has potential for growth now and in the future. There's a lot of people who have come up with ideas. It could be from technological ideas to, physical ideas. And the big thing is always, have you tapped into a unique idea that has demand and that can grow? Because once you have that unique idea and you've seen, there's a potential market out there, and when you extrapolate, that market is probably countrywide or maybe even continent-wide. Investors are very excited at companies that are infinitely scalable. If you can scale across Kenya and serve millions of people, or scale across Africa and serve hundreds of millions of people, if you have such an idea, people will be very willing to listen. So as long as you've proven that people are willing to pay for that idea and that you have that scale, you become very attractive to investors.
I know they say there's no safe investment, but there are investments that are less risky. In your opinion, and just looking at the Kenyan context, what are some of these less risky investment opportunities?
First of all, I think we are just a very risk-averse community or country. We really should be taking a lot more risk. And I'll give you an example. If you go back to Silicon Valley culture, people actually invest in 10 companies knowing that 8 or 9 are going to fail. But they know that the one that succeeds is going to succeed and become the next Facebook. So we should not shy away from risk. We should become very open. But when you're looking at less risky ideas, it would most likely be in areas where there is high demand and underserved. I know there are certain aspects of agriculture that I would not say agriculture is less risky, but there are certain aspects of maybe organic agriculture, serving in the herbs and spices space. I have friends who have entered that space and facing quite a bit of demand. I would, of course, everyone goes for property, but that has its issues right now. If you look at the economy, so I would say just looking at different ideas. Like one of the things when I look at this country and I look at maybe the education space, we've had many kids transition from primary school to secondary schools, and there's not enough supply in that space. So that's something you can consider. High school education and even tertiary education could be a space you can consider in investing. So I would say the principle behind it is, because there's a lot of ideas, is where is there significant demand for something but very little supply, that starts to show areas where they could be good investments.
All right. I know currently in Kenya, and we've had this conversation before, the fact that a lot of these new investments are not so new. It's a copy and paste mechanism that a lot of people are taking. How important is it to be original in your business idea?
I think it's important maybe in jurisdictions where there's a lot of innovations. When you look at, I think we could be considered a transitional economy. In transitional economies, you tend to have room to implement a lot of ideas that are not even rocket science, but will still make you a lot of money. In Kenya today, it's still difficult to find a plumber who will do a good job, or somebody, a carpenter who will do a good job, or a mason who will do a good job and do all the right fittings. So there's a lot of opportunities even just with your normal things. As long as there's any area you can think about where you're struggling to get something, if you look at our roads, look at our pavements, there's still so many places that don't have. It means there's a need for those things to be put in those places. So in transitional economies, you'll find a lot of room for just your run-of-the-mill ideas, but also you'll find a lot of room, because in a place like Kenya, where technology with mobile money created a lot of opportunity for people to create solutions around M-Pesa, so you also find room for us to trailblaze in some of these ideas that are technological as well.
All right, this is more of a personal question. Joram, as an investment, where are you likely to put your money? Is it in tech? Is it in the capital market? Is it in agriculture?
Okay, so I am quite a sophisticated investor. So I actually dabble across the board. I have property. I have invested in the NSC. It's not doing very well right now, and largely because of COVID, but it also has its cycles. I've invested in this business as well, and that has also been growing. But say if I had a large chunk of money and I was to put it into a certain investment, one of the areas I would definitely look at is innovations by young people. That I think are promising. I have actually invested in a company myself that I've put in some money for somebody who's doing some small-scale manufacturing from the house. So I would look at what are those products that I think have the potential to grow, especially homegrown brands, because I think there's so much room. If you look at, like, for example, the cosmetics and space, a lot of homegrown brands have come and they're flourishing. So I would actually look at those kinds of ideas. And if you ask me, I think our millionaires and billionaires are too risk averse. They should be putting money into these startups and enabling them to flourish.
All right, as we wind up, my final question to you is, what are some of the things that SMEs need to have in their fingertips, they must do for every business?
I would say, especially at this time, one of the things that I see people probably very shy to do is put themselves out there and let people know about the businesses they're doing. You'll be surprised how many people are running businesses, but even people on their Facebook platform do not know that they're running those businesses because you're shy about it. So I would say be visible. Do not be afraid to publicize and let the world know about the product or service that you're selling and that you're good at it. Focus on making sure whatever product or service you deliver is very high quality, because the only thing that will make people loyal to you is if the quality is good and consistent down the line. And then we need to start thinking big, beyond just building a business that sustains you, to building businesses that can grow, scale, and make a very big difference. And that big thinking and investing in that direction is going to transform this economy.
Well, Joram, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us, and we'll definitely be engaging you a little bit more in the future. And that's how we wrap up this episode of the Business Hour. My name is Jimmy Mbogo. Let's do this again some other time. And remember, every hour